What's going on, everybody? It's Clint from the Die Hard MMA podcast, and this is the UFC 269 Total Takedown. You may be wondering to yourself, Clint, why is this so dang late? Clint, why do you have that egregious purple thing on your chest? Well, because it's Thursday night, folks, and the Minnesota Vikings are playing right now, and I had some family crap to take care of beforehand, so I apologize the video is late today, but let's go ahead and get straight on into this thing. We got a big card, and as you may know, if this is not your first time watching this video, we're going over totals here, overs and unders. We broke down the entire card, top to bottom, picking sides, best bets, all of that on Monday. Let's see if we can find some additional value by looking at when we think these fights will finish. First fight of the night. Jillian Robertson taking on Priscilla Cachoeira. Total set at 2.5. The over is plus 135. The under is minus 160 at this point. Woo! That is some juice to lay on a women's MMA under. But the problem is I can't really argue against it. Jillian Robertson is a grappling specialist. She's just sells out for that takedown. She tries to get her opponent to the mat as quickly as possible. She's got big elbows, ground and pound. She's got that rear naked choke that is just nasty on her. And then Priscilla Cachoeira on the flip side of this thing has pretty dang solid power for a woman in this division. So if this fight takes place standing, Priscilla Cachoeira has a really good job of making Jillian Robertson fold up. And if this fight takes place on the ground, Jillian Robertson has a really good chance of getting that real quick tap. So either way, one of these women can finish this fight. They've both been finished before, so we don't have that question. I think under makes sense, but I really don't like laying that kind of chalk on a women's MMA under because, as you know, most women's MMA fights tend to go over. So not really digging the value on that spot, but hard to argue that someone's probably finishing this fight somewhere in the ballpark of the second round. Bantamweight fight up next. Randy Costa taking on Tony Kelly. Really tricky fight here in my opinion. Total set at 1.5 for this one. Now, one thing to remember, we are in the big cage. It's a big UFC pay-per-view, so we're going to be in the larger size cage, not the small one for the Apex. Over 1.5 is going to be minus 135. Under 1.5 is even money plus 100, and we have seen Randy Costa kill every single opponent of his in that first round in a hurry. And I don't expect him to necessarily do something different here. That's how he fights. Now, I think maybe if he turns that corner, he's got a good opponent, someone stylistically who matches up with him well karate style, that they can actually have a bit of an extended matchup here, and we can see him go past that first round, work on that cardio, not be such a gas tank dump, but I have nothing to base that off of. If we go based off of history, expect Randy Costa to come out early and hard. Tony Kelly is a guy who's been tough and durable early and then kind of ratchets up the intensity as the fight goes on. He's got some solid Brazilian jiu-jitsu skills, not a ton in the wrestling department. So if he does happen to get this thing to the ground later in the fight, especially when Randy Costa is tired, there is a chance of him finishing. So if you're banking Randy Costa doing his thing, you're probably looking under 1.5. The guy's tough and gritty and durable, at least when he has a full gas tank, so I don't think he's getting finished early. You're thinking over 1.5 probably if you're looking the Tony Kelly side. So you're kind of picking your fighter with this total. I would lean towards the over, but that's just kind of a back of the neck hairs type of situation. Nothing really to base that off of. I'm looking over 1.5. No bet for me. Ryan Hall taking on Darrick Minner. Total set at 2.5. Over is plus 120, even money. Under is minus 160. And I do think that the under makes a whole lot of sense here. We've seen Ryan Hall finish people with spinning heel kicks. We've seen his jiu-jitsu game. When he's on point, he can snap basically anybody off. And then his opponent, Darrick Minner, he finishes anybody and everybody in round one. He's another round one monster. Comes out hard. He's explosive. He hits hard. He's got a good grappling base, good top game. So if anybody was going to submit Ryan Hall, now I don't think Darrick Minner will personally, but if anybody was going to, it would be round one Minner. So both these guys can definitely finish. We have seen both guys finished. Again, that hits the criteria for the under. Again, don't really like laying the minus 160, but someone like Minner who gasses out ridiculously and just dumps off after that first round, he's basically there to be hit. He's there to be finished after that point. That makes me feel a little bit better about the 2.5 because he doesn't tend to go the distance when he's not the one winning the fight. Hell, he doesn't tend to go the distance when he is winning the fight either. We've got Alex Perez taking on Matt Danger Schnell. Total set at 2.5. This one over 2.5 is minus 150, under 2.5 plus 120. And I would be looking at violence here again on this spot. Now, this all comes down to Alex Perez. It comes down to the game plan that he's got in mind for this particular fight, because he's more than capable of having that heavy top game, solid wrestling, dragging his opponent to the ground and keeping him there, beating him up for 15 minutes. He can do that if he wants to. But we've also seen that leg kick. We've also seen that explosive power in the hands of his. We've seen the athletic advantages. So I absolutely think that Alex Perez is fully capable of finishing Matt Schnell. And what we've seen from Alex is when he loses, it's because he sticks his neck out and he gets caught in a guillotine choke. Now, Matt Schnell is a guy with a pretty solid ground game. We know he's got some good chokes on him, so that nuclear option for the choke is available to him. While I think the finish is going to come from the Perez side, Matt Schnell can't be counted out here. So I do think both guys can finish, and they both have the path to victory to finish the other one. So plus money on the under 2.5. Give it to me, baby. I like that spot. Miranda Maverick taking on Erin Blanchfield. Total set at 2.5, and this is a more classic women's MMA fight. Over 2.5 is minus 350. Under 2.5 is plus 250. And I agree with the over. I'm not going anywhere near that kind of a price tag, but it makes sense to me that this one would go the distance. Erin Blanchfield, slick striker, BJJ black belt. Miranda Maverick, just an absolute tank of a woman, so I don't think she's getting finished by strikes, and if it hits the ground, she's probably in wrestling control positions, and she should be strong enough to keep herself safe, even if she isn't necessarily in a dominant spot, get back to her feet, and then we're back to striking. And I don't know that either of them actually have the power to finish the other on the feet with a clean shot. Maybe some ground and pound if there's a TKO stoppage type of situation. That's the only real way it's happening. So I expect this thing to go the distance, probably all the way to the judges. Middleweight fight finishing out the early prelims here. Andre Muniz taking on Eric yo boy Anders. Total for this one is set at 2.5. The under 2.5 is plus 120. The over 2.5 is minus 160. And again, it's tough, but I do kind of agree with this total. I feel like it's pretty sharp. They said it right. I'd be looking at the over 1.5 here. Andre Muniz is a guy that's coming off a real quick finish of one of the legends of our sport, but realistically, that's not how he's always had his game work. He ends up accepting back position. He kind of is low volume on the feet. He wants to grapple, but he's not a great wrestler. Someone like Eric Anders is going to be able to push him around the octagon. As long as Eric Anders minds his P's and Q's, stays at a safe distance, keeps this thing on the feet, maybe presses him up against the fence, but doesn't chase him to the ground or anything like that, I think Eric Anders is going to be in the control seat, and I don't expect Andre Muniz to be able to snap another man's arm in half, at least not early. So I do think this one is going to end up going late. Whether it's Eric Anders winning this thing via 15-minute decision, being the only one putting up any kind of striking, or this thing hitting the ground and being a wrestling match of some kind. Maybe Muniz gets a late finish when Eric Anders slows down, but I kind of think this one's going over, and I would expect that finish, like I said, to come a little bit later than earlier. So I'm not going to be betting this one, but I would be looking over 1.5 if I was going to approach it from a betting perspective. Middleweight fight, Jordan Wright taking on Bruno Silva, and this is the nuclear option of the night. Now, this is one of the totals I have actually already bet myself. Total set at 1.5. The over is plus 120. The under is minus 160. I got the under 1.5 at minus 155 a little bit earlier in the week. So I'm already on this one, and it's one that I have actually bet myself. I just don't know how you make an argument for the over here. Bruno Silva does have a history of being taken down, but he's a BJJ black belt once it gets to the floor, and he's just got that holy hell power on him. Jordan Wright is a glass cannon. This guy comes out and finishes people within the first minute of the fight, and he really can't take any type of significant damage going the other direction. So he's going to kill or be killed, and he's going to do it early. And he's taking on a guy who is just known for murdering people with his fists. So I think Bruno Silva either knocks Jordan Wright out extremely early, or what we have seen is Bruno Silva has a tendency of giving up his back and getting tapped out. I think Jordan Wright by submission is going to be something that's live if he's able to hold on to some kind of top control early in this fight. When he's fresh, when he's clean, when they're not sweaty, he's tight, they can get the submission done. But I don't think this thing gets past the first round, if I'm being honest. So I like that minus 1.5, still minus 160. I would still take a look at it. Heavyweight boys up next. Augusto Sakai taking on Tai Tuivasa. Total set at 1.5, and this is the second total that I've actually played on this card, and I like this one a lot. Total set at 1.5. Now it's minus 150 to the over, plus 110 to the under. I got minus 135 on the over, and I hit this one hard. 2.7 units to win 2 on this over 1.5. Reason being, we've got Augusto Sakai, who's a man who likes to finesse his opponents. He likes to play the outside. He likes to control the range. He likes to use that jab and stay on his bike. What you've got is a Tai Tuivasa guy. As long as you don't run straight into him, he has a hard time putting his hands to work. Those leg kicks, he can do work with those. But he kind of has to be more at a distance spot for that. You're not going to be able to really wreck someone using the style of Augusto Sakai as long as they're refusing to engage with you. And that's where Augusto Sakai is going to play the outside, keep the distance, stay away. And that's going to extend this fight, in my opinion. Even if Tai Tuivasa has been a finisher in his last couple fights, it's been non-UFC caliber competition, so we can't really expect him to come out here and do that to someone like Augusto Sakai, who's only been finished by some of the legends of the heavyweight division. I like the over. Bantamweight fight up next. Pedro Munoz taking on Dom Cruz. Total here is set at 2.5, over 2.5, minus 225, under 2.5, plus 165. And this one makes sense to me too, to go to the over. Dom Cruz is a decision machine. He works with the footwork. He has that long, stiff jab that he sticks out in front of his opponent's face all the time. Pedro Munoz, he's got some power. He's got that guillotine. He likes those leg kicks. But you know what? He has been a bit of a decision guy himself recently. We haven't seen that power really pop its ugly head up in quite some time. Now, Dominic Cruz may be fading just a little bit, so there is the chance that this is the time where Pedro Munoz finally eats that front leg up and then lands a big power shot on him, but the finish is only coming from one side. Dom Cruz isn't finishing Pedro Munoz ever. Munoz is incredibly durable, and we've seen him time and time again just refuse to go down. Dom Cruz already not being a finisher, I can't expect him to suddenly change that against a guy as tough as Pedro Munoz. Since we've only got one guy where the finish is coming from, and it's a might finish, not a will finish, yeah, this one we're not going to be looking at the under. Featherweight fight to close out the preliminary card is Josh Emmett taking on Dan Ige. Total set at 2.5. The over 2.5 is minus 200. The under 2.5 is plus 150. And this one, it's kind of the same situation as the last fight. Josh Emmett, though, is an absolute destructive powerhouse. When this guy hits you, he will cave the side of your head in. Like, this is next level explosive power. Problem is he's coming off of a layoff. We're not entirely certain that it's the same Josh Emmett that we're used to seeing. I think it is. I have some confidence that it's going to be the same guy, and he's going to do just fine in there on Saturday. However, it's hard to put your money on something like that when we just simply don't know at this point. And Dan Ige is another guy very similar to Pedro Munoz, who has just been so tough to finish. He has been so hard to put away. So because of that, we can't really bank on him getting finished for maybe the first time in his career. If anyone's going to do it, it's going to be a guy like Josh Emmett. But Dan Ige is never finishing Josh Emmett unless Josh Emmett is a complete shell of himself. Got to rely on the durability. I'm thinking this one probably goes over from a betting perspective, although I think, if you're looking at sides, I know that's not what we're doing here, but if you were looking at sides, Emmett is the one with the finishing upside of the two. Bantamweight fight to start off the main card. Julian Paiva taking on Sean O'Malley. And what we have for the total is a 2.5. Over is plus 100, looks like. Even money to the over 2.5. Minus 130 to the under. So the under 2.5 is taking some money, and I think that makes sense. Sean O'Malley is a guy who plays with his food a little bit, but let's be real, he's a sniper. The kid has ridiculous accuracy in his strikes. He's got pop on all of his strikes as well, so this kid can finish. Julian Paiva is a guy that's got some defensive issues, and he can take some big shots. I mean, we have seen him wobbled, we've seen him hurt, he's been put down a couple times. He always manages to grind his way back into it somehow, but it's been because some of his opponents have just refused to take their foot off the gas, and his last fight with Kyler Matrix, he gassed himself out. That's really the only reason Paiva was able to take that fight over. Sean O'Malley is a guy that's going to be patient, so he'll stay outside, he'll pick those shots, and if he continues to stay slow, remain calm, remain collected, pick his shots, I think eventually he finds the button on Julian Paiva. And we've also seen that Sean O'Malley, I mean, for better or worse, he may not be built for war. And a guy like Julian Paiva, if he's going to win this thing, it's because he stays aggressive. It's because he stays in your face. He'll attack those leg kicks. He blitzes from range. He's got some long punches on him, and he hits pretty damn hard. He's also got the submission upside here in this spot. We haven't seen O'Malley's ground game in a long time. There's still a lot of questions surrounding what he can and can't do on the floor. So Julian Paiva is capable of finishing Sean O'Malley, believe it or not. While I think the finish comes from Sean, it's possible it comes the other way. The under 2.5 is probably the way to look, and -130, -125, it's not so bad. Flyweight up next, Kai Kara-France taking on Cody Garbrandt. Total here set at 2.5, and I know it's crazy. We're getting all these little guys and these 2.5s expecting finishes. We got some serious heat being thrown with some of these fighters on this card. Total set at 2.5. Under is -135. Over 2.5 is even money +100. And again, I gotta agree with the under. Cody Garbrandt dropping a weight class, we know that messes with people. So whether or not he makes this thing healthy kind of favors the under both ways. Because if he makes the weight drop to flyweight and he retains all that speed and power, he's gonna be a monster at flyweight. If he makes that cut, and it is a problem, and he doesn't do it healthy, and it doesn't go smooth, he's going to be severely compromised, and he's a guy whose chin we've seen cracked already several times. So I think Cody Garbrandt is really a big key to this puzzle. Kai Kara-France is someone we've seen wobbled, dropped, hurt multiple times before, and now he's taken on one of the biggest flyweights in the division since he's making this drop. Probably bigger power than he's used to facing. So, yeah, he could get hurt and dropped by Cody Garbrandt. We know Garbrandt can knock out just about anybody. They call Kai Kara-France Don't Blink for a reason. The kid's got fast hands, and he's got some underrated power himself. So I think both these guys are more than capable of finishing, and they are both more than capable of getting chin checked and dropped. So I definitely think the under 2.5 is the way to go if you're betting this one. Welterweight fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Geoff Neal coming up next. Total again set at 2.5. The over is +105. The under is -140. And I have to look violence again. It's hard not to look violence with these fighters and these names. Pons is one of the guys that we've seen with just ridiculous striking power. Now he's getting a little bit older. We've seen him get knocked out before. That chin has faltered a couple times. Geoff Neal, massive power on this guy. We've also seen his confidence get shot a little bit. There's the issue with the DUI on fight week. Like, what is this guy doing? Where is his mental state at? If he comes in on point, he could absolutely blast Santiago Ponzinibbio out of the cage, and that probably goes under. If he comes in and he's not quite himself, Santiago's going to treat him as such, and he's going to boot him disrespectfully out of the cage. So I think both guys absolutely have finishing upside here, and if I was going to bet it, I'd be looking under. Co-main event, women's bantamweight fight, Amanda Nunes taking on Julianna Peña. This one is so interesting to me. Total set at 1.5. The over, it looks like it's getting hit as we speak because it's -125, but I see some -140s suddenly popping up around the internet. Under 1.5 looks like it's even money, +100. And Amanda Nunes has a tendency of getting her opponents out of there and getting them out of there early. So if you think she's going to do what she does, if the GOAT is just going to continue being the GOAT, yeah, this is a round 1 KO spot. However, if you think Julianna Peña stands a chance of dragging this thing to the ground, if you think she has the ability to survive one round of hell to get back in this fight and start going to the grappling, well, then you think this fight is probably going over. And it's as simple as that. Amanda Nunes, if she decides to engage in the grappling, she could still win this fight and have it go over 1.5. So the 1.5 contains both fighters, not just the one Julianna Peña, but the under 1.5 is probably only Amanda Nunes. So kind of pick your spot here. I've got this weird feeling this fight is not going to go the way that we think it will. I'm going to be saying over, but again, that's another one where it's just kind of a gambler's intuition type of spot, not necessarily anything that I can base on anything factual. Main event time, Charles Oliveira taking on Dustin the Diamond Poirier. Total on this one is set at 2.5. It looks like they opened the 1.5 a little earlier in the week, and that thing got hammered to the over. So 2.5 seems to be the prevalent line around the market today. Over 2.5 is +125. And under 2.5 is juiced all the way to -150, -170 in some places. So they are definitely favoring the under, but money is coming in on the over. And this is a very interesting case to me. I feel like there's a bit of recency bias with these two guys getting their opponents out of there in the first round rapidly in their last few fights. It's something we've seen them do on repeat here these last couple of events. And I don't know if it's going to play out that way. I think these guys, there's no bad blood. There's no both of them have now touched the title, so not to say that they don't want it, but it's their second time around the block now. It's not like it's being dangled in front of them like a carrot anymore. They're respectful of each other and each other's skill sets. I think round one is going to be a bit more of a feeling out process, and especially the way that Charles Oliveira fights, I think there's going to be much more grappling involved than what we're used to seeing with Dustin, where he fights a lot of strikers who want to just basically go to war and bang immediately. Now that could go one of two ways. If Charles Oliveira really wants to grapple, that can slow this fight down and really push it to the over and do it in a hurry. Or maybe he catches Dustin Poirier off guard. Well, not that he's not going to be game planning for it, because obviously Charles Oliveira grapples. But Dustin Poirier is not used to facing grapplers very often, so maybe a submission comes a little earlier than we're expecting, because Charlie O is just that damn good. There's a lot of questions surrounding this fight. Personally, I think it goes late. I think we get into the champion rounds for the first time of Charles Oliveira's career. I think that's how Dustin Poirier fights. I think his grappling is defensively sound enough for him to survive that long, even if he is on the losing side of something. We've seen him do that against someone like Khabib, who is the best grappler the division has ever seen. So I think that even though Charlie Oliveira is probably incredible, he's not Khabib level. So I expect Dustin Poirier to be able to survive in that situation, drag this fight late. Whether he takes over and gets himself back into this fight, lands a TKO late or something like that, who knows? But I do think he's good enough not to get finished early on. And we know Charles Oliveira is tough enough not to get finished early on. We've seen that in his last couple fights. He's really turned a corner. He's not that kid that quits anymore. So I expect this fight to get up and over that 2.5. It's scary as all hell with the firepower these two are capable of, but I kind of think we're going to see round 4. That's the Total Takedown, everybody. Good luck on your action. We'll see you tomorrow bright and early for the undefeated post-weigh-in show. Smash the like.